super happy with the fact that I'm able to balance a W-2 in this. I have the ability from a monetary perspective to not be solely dependent upon the money that I get from the business.
Welcome to Trial to Triumph, hosted by Caleb Johnson, the show about leaning into life's constant testing on your way to realizing your biggest blessings.
How's it going, everyone? My name is Caleb Johnson, host of From Trial to Triumph, and today I am very excited about our guest, Mr. Ricardo Torres. Ricardo, welcome to the show.
Caleb, thank you so much for having me, man. It's a true privilege to be here with you on a Saturday morning chatting, man.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So can you give our listeners a quick synopsis about your career and just your backstory?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was kind of raised in a military family, and my dad kind of had us traveling all around the world, and I always had a passion for military. So after high school, I spent a couple of years working in the civilian sector for Citigroup, the mortgage division, where I kind of had an opportunity to learn a little bit more about mortgages. I worked there, and 2008, subprime lending and the mortgage crisis hit. And the mortgage kind of environment hit rock bottom, and I was present while that occurred. And so that kind of changed a couple of things for me, from my perspective. And so I decided to want to do something that I thought was more interesting in flying airplanes. So I went to the Reserve Officer Training Corps, or ROTC division at University of South Florida, got my degree there. And then a couple years later, I got a pilot slot. So that was a really cool transition for me and for what I wanted to do. Just rewinding just a little bit, I've got a wife and two girls, and we live here in Tucson, Arizona. I'm stationed at Davis-Monthan. So that being said, I did the pilot thing, have always had a passion for mortgages, real estate, investments in general. And a couple of years ago, my business partner and good friend of mine, we were looking at our portfolio, and we asked ourselves, what can we do to really increase that velocity of capital? What can we do to really make our money work for us more than it is right now? And real estate was the answer. And the Reader's Digest version is, we started off with this concept of buying one single family residence every year. And you probably heard this before, right? And you buy one every year and over 20 years, you own 20 different houses, and you're just cash flowing, and you're a boss, you know? Little did we realize at the time that there's a lot of work that's put in with just one single family home. And we later learned the concept of economies of scale, and thankfully we learned it before we actually bought any single family homes. And so that was about 2 years ago. Now Vectored Equity, my business partner and I, we co-own 199 doors across the U.S., and we're still pilots in the Air Force. And so I'm a true testament, and I'm happy to talk on the ability to manage time, to have a passion that was once mortgages and real estate, to then transition and then somehow go back to that. It's okay. Mistakes can be made. Lessons are learned. And this journey that we're on, it winds down different paths. And for me, it was an interesting one in that we started with real estate, and I'm kind of back at real estate, but I'm still doing both things. So that's kind of the quick and dirty on, the last 10 to 15 years, if you will.
Wow. And obviously you're a high achiever, going from the mortgage industry right into being a pilot, and now you're doing both you also have a family, and that's great. What in the mortgage industry, what's the biggest thing you learned from that? Because it sounded like, I'm assuming that was in 2006, kind of around the financial crisis.
Yeah, it was, it was around 2005 to around 2009 that I worked there. I think the biggest lesson I learned there, Caleb, was what side of the coin I wanted to be on. The side of the coin that I was on was the customer service, non-client facing, kind of back office managerial position that essentially worked for the man. I was intimate with what a home equity line of credit was. I was intimate with, equity increasing over X amount of homes that were in our portfolio at Citi Mortgage. But I was on the other side of the coin. The side of the coin that I wanted to be on was the ownership side of it, the one who was reaping the benefits and taking advantage of the equity upswing, if you will. And I interacted with so many investors and so many owners. And one of the things I realized were they were very much just like myself, motivated people who had a vision or goals in mind, and they were going after them. It just so happened that they were going after them in an outfit that was their own, not that of a large Fortune 500 company. That was a huge turning point for me because I recognized that in order to really be in control of my own time, I needed to do something different. And that was not necessarily work the 9-to-5 standard rat race. No disrespect to anybody with that. I'm still in it myself, and I'm making strides towards getting out of it. But that was one of my big pullaways, and it dawned on me when the mortgage crisis, before it, and then even after it, because there were still folks who were well leveraged in properties that, despite equity going down, they were still renting their apartments or their homes out, and making a decent cash flow. And I saw it firsthand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the key to wealth is ownership, right? And you obviously picked up on that and knew that being on the ownership side of the coin is where it's at, mm-hmm. and you're able to have more control in that sense as well, and make the decisions. And that's another thing that the wealthy talk about is they, if you look at these large family offices, they want to have the majority of the control for a reason. And that's and that's how they've gotten there. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense too. And you hear so many times, and this is the bad part about it that not a lot of folks talk about, Caleb, is this concept of you want to be on the ownership side of it, and then somebody finally owns something, and it's a single family perhaps, but they're kind of jaded because it's really high maintenance, or it just didn't give them the effect that they were looking for. And I see so many people, they get into the industry and then they get right back out because of one bad experience. And to that I say, take it back to the drawing table, recognize how you underwrote that, find some lessons learned, and then don't give up, stay the course. And that's so big for the listeners out there. I mean, if you're thinking about something and a single family is where you're starting, put time and effort into sharpening your axe, more time into that than actually chopping the tree down, if that makes any sense.
Can you elaborate on what you mean by sharpening the axe?
Yeah, most definitely. So the act of sharpening the axe essentially is your preparations prior to purchasing an asset, prior to purchasing an investment property. My recommendation is, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but my recommendation is spend as much time sharpening your axe. In other words, spend as much time underwriting this property. Determine from a conservative perspective what you think those operating expenses are going to be. Don't romanticize anything. Make data-driven decisions. Don't go into it emotionally because you think you love this property because it's located half a mile from the lake and there's so many things going on there, but in reality it's wrought with issues. Sharpen your axe by getting market comparisons and identifying from a data-driven perspective what a similar class property is doing, whether you're underwriting a 20 or a 50 unit or a quadplex. Figure out what something similar to it is doing in the economy, and then use recent comparisons, 6 months to a year, to determine what that previously sold at, what a similar square footage is renting for. So many people will go in dark and go into a dark room, pull the trigger on buying a single family home just because they thought, oh, okay, cool. This brings in $1,500 a month. My mortgage is going to be $1,000. I'm going to cash flow $500. Let's go. It's not that easy. You have to be a little bit more conservative about that. And the more conservative you are, the more you'll get an accurate snapshot as to whether or not that's a really good deal. So I say sharpen that axe as best as possible. Spend the majority of your time and effort doing that. That's a mental game, right? That's not a physical game. And sometimes that requires partnerships with people who are smarter than you in that field. And I'm very open to admit this. Like, look, my business partner and he has a certain specialty in things and I have a specialty in other things. And it behooved me to let him run with his specialties and let me run with mine. That's the way you really make progress in this industry. You cannot hoard everything onto your own or by yourself. So anyways, getting back to the question, do that. And then once the axe is sharp and once you're ready to pull the trigger, and you'll do so knowing that in your heart of heart, this was a good decision, whether or not the offer gets accepted. And then guess what? Then begins the next level, which is, all right, I'm going to send out 1,000 different offers here, and I'm probably only going to get five accepted, but that's okay. That's the way you play the game. you
Right,
know?
right. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
experiencing that right now where I am going into a new market, and
Yeah.
especially that's really dangerous because,
Oh, yeah.
looking at, I mean, we're 2 weeks into this, trying to line up property managers, and different managers are saying different things, and
Yeah.
you don't know what's the good side of the tracks and what's the bad side of the tracks, and especially when you're working with someone else's money, because you
Yes.
should have a fiduciary responsibility for that, and now you just really want to be cautious, and I think you
Oh,
hit that
yeah.
right on the head there.
Yeah, no, that's huge, and I have felt exactly what you're feeling when you go into a new market, right? Like we've been in the Columbia, South Carolina market for a little while now. We're very intimate with that market. We recognize what the average square foot is for generally an apartment complex that we're eyeballing, the rent per square foot. We know what the economic triggers are. We're really good with that. We know the property management companies in the vicinity. We have a stronghold on what we're going to pay in terms of property management fee. But it takes a leap of faith to go into a new market, but a set standard of underwriting practices, if you will, that you cannot compromise on. You still have to hold the line, whether you're in Las Vegas or whether you're in South Carolina. Yeah, the market's going to change, but you have to be able to recognize that it's based on the data as well. So, no, I applaud you, man. That's a tough thing to do, but in order for us to grow, in order for us to make more progress, we have to step outside our comfort zone sometimes, and we have to go do some different, bigger things.
Hmm. Yeah, you can't grow if you just stay the same. Right.
That's
Right.
right, man. That's right. Yeah.
What let's talk a little bit about the deals that you've done on the multifamily side.
Yeah.
I know, like you just mentioned, South Carolina, and I know you're also in Tucson. So let's talk a little bit
Yeah.
about what you got going on so far.
Yeah, most definitely. So our first deal was a 14 unit apartment complex, and I'll give you kind of the cliff notes on each one of them. First deal was a 14 unit in Tucson, Jefferson Avenue Apartments. C minus, really deep C minus asset, all under market rents. Bought it for $970,000, which came out to I think somewhere between 63 and 65 a door. And this was before the market really got super hot in Tucson, which was really cool because we were able to ride that wave. I always say, ride the wave as a surfer, which is you're on top of the water. Don't be under the water. You want to get on top of the water. So we rode that wave. About 10 months later, after some trials and tribulations, if you will, we recognized that asset for us was going to be a significant equity play, not so much a cash flow play. And what I mean by that is, if we sold it or cash out refinance, we would get a little bit more out of that than we were on a monthly basis. The operating expenses were extremely high and a little bit higher than we had actually underwritten for. So when I talk about sharpening that axe, that is because I was cut by that a little bit, if you know what I mean. And so some tremendous lessons learned there. We really earned our stripes with that 14 unit. We sold it 10 months later for 1.325 mil. And that equated for us to about a 2.1 equity multiple. We essentially took $240,000 and we pulled out 560-ish, which we were really excited about. We 1031 exchanged that. While that was performing, we were kind of tapped on our funds just a little bit. And so we then explored the concept of a syndication. So that first deal was a joint venture between myself and my business partner. We each had $120,000 in the deal, and that's how we bought it. The second deal was a 30 unit in South Carolina, previously townhomes, large square footage, 1,400 square feet, 30 units. Purchase price was 3.36 mil, and we bought those under market rents, unsophisticated property manager who had never really gone, to that scale before. And that property was successfully syndicated in less than 2.5 weeks, or the money was raised in less than 2.5 weeks. So we're really excited about that. Yeah, it was a tremendous play for us, and we got local credit union financing. Home run. That asset is we closed on that in November of 2021, and here we are in August. We're close to hitting the preferred return for our investors, and we're still repositioning the asset. It was a phenomenal deal. No prepayment penalty through the finance company. Really good interest rate, and we're taking really good care of our investors on that. And we anticipate that this one will continue to knock it out of the park. mark.
Yeah, can we talk about that a little bit, because I'm still stunned by a 2.5 week raise, and
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit. How did that happen?
Yeah, most definitely. So, okay, this is a really good concept and principle in partnerships, in my opinion. Pat and I had not had experience with raising capital prior to this deal. We were using our own money. What we were doing well was we were very transparent and communicative about how our property was performing, that Tucson property, the 14 unit. So all of our friends, all of our family were in on how we were performing. They were vicariously living through us, if you will. You take these two pilots who want to do something different with their money. They are essentially flipping the concept of retirement on its head by not investing all of their money into a TSP or a 401k equivalent and waiting until they're 65 to get their money. And instead, they're doing something with it now. And by golly, they're actually getting some of their cash flow and they're actually using it now. Hold on a sec. You got my ear, right? That was the relationship, and that's how it began with a lot of our friends and family. And so therein lies one of our first abilities and opportunities to actually raise that capital, was because we had a captive audience. We had an audience who was interested in doing something very similar to us. So long story short, on this deal, we partnered with a good friend and business partner of ours, Tori Sheffer, who owns Sheffer Capital. He has a lot of ownership in Michigan as well as a couple of other states. And we met him off of a Facebook multifamily page. Like, not going to lie, that's a preliminary thing, right? You meet somebody, you don't quite know who they are. You need to vet them a little bit. It's an opportunistic avenue for you to identify partners in the industry. I took him out to lunch one day. He was in the vicinity. I think he was moving to the Scottsdale area. He was looking at the Tucson market, bought him lunch, asked how I could add value to his portfolio and what he's doing. He asked me the same. And I said, look, I need a key principle. I need somebody who demonstrates a KP or a net worth to take down a deal. And then in addition to that, while I'm confident I can raise a little bit of money, I can't raise $1 million by myself. Pat and I, Vectored Equity, cannot do that. So we need a little bit of help with that. So he said, well, find a deal. If it underwrites and if it pencils in and it's a deal, whether it's to John, to Ricardo, to Caleb, to Bobby, right? Somebody will be interested in doing that. And if you have a large enough network, you can eventually cast that net and you'll get some fish, if you will. So we found that deal through a broker relationship. And I'll go super Reader's Digest now because I know I'm talking a lot about this, but we found that deal. We brought Tori in. And Tori brought another partner of ours, Sam Silverman, in. And essentially, the four of us, general partners, raised that money in a very short period of time. It was a tremendous opportunity for us to learn not only the inner workings of how capital is raised, but also how to syndicate and how to become a general partner. What that looked like cradle to the grave, from the due diligence to the inner workings and the communications with attorneys, to an offering memorandum and what a pitch deck looks like and how to speak to the investor and to demonstrate the what's in it for them, the return for their investment, and then explain the equity split and structure. It was a tremendous experience for us, and it's one that I hang my head on as probably one of the greatest lessons that we've had. Was that we jumped into the deep end. We partnered with somebody who helped mitigate our risk, because folks weren't necessarily going to say, Vectored Equity at the time, I'll invest $1 million with you. You've done it with your own apartment complex, but I want to see you do it with a large amount of limited partners. And so we were able to do just that, and it's performing super well today.
Going back to that first initial conversation that you had with him, what I loved what you said was, what can I do to add value to you? I think so many times, and you also met the guy for lunch, and being in Tucson, that's a solid hour and a half drive to Scottsdale.
Yeah.
So to be able to see that, to see someone that you want to be like or have what they want to have, and tell them, hey, what can I do to add value to you? And on the flip side of that, I think a lot of people, and you might be able to attest to this too, just by what you've seen, is people will say, they don't even know the person, and they will say, hey, what can I do to add value to you? And sometimes on the receiving end of that, when someone asks, what can I do to add value to you? You think, I don't know, man. I don't know you. But
that's
sometimes whenever you do have a little bit more of an intimate relationship, even if it's, you just hear, you just hear what the person where they are, what they've done, and maybe you can frame that a little bit better, especially when they get to know you a little bit over lunch or whatever that is. But I think that's great to ask, what can I do to add value to you? Because so many people are looking to receive something, right?
Yeah, absolutely, man. And that's a philosophy of mine. Like, I do not attempt to network by going out and doing something for myself. What I attempt to network with, and I'm very transparent about this, and look, at the end of the day, you got to be real, right? Somebody's going to value that authenticity. I tell people straight up, hey, look, what can I help you with something? And if I can help you with something, I recognize that good people will reciprocate, right? That's my form of networking. Why? Because it satisfies my ability to determine if they are going to reciprocate and they're good people, then great. And if they don't, then that's okay too. This is not a one-for-one game. Life is not that way, right? Like, sometimes you're going to get snubbed. Sometimes you're going to do something and not get something in return. That's okay. But guess what? Sometimes you're going to do something and get 2 or 3-fold in return. And that's a philosophy that Vectored Equity kind of holds on to, and we continue to try to demonstrate. Yes, the conversation that I go into is based on having rapport built with the person, right? If I go into and just talk to Joe and I don't know Joe and I say, hey, how can I add value? I mean, the answer could be 50 different ways, right? After that conversation that I had with Tori, it was evident that he was going places, he was doing things, and I wanted to try to replicate some of those things. And I was okay being transparent with that, right? Like, there's this concept in human nature. And I was doing a Peloton class the other day, man, and it resonated with me. The instructor mentioned this. She said, find people, or identify where you want to be in life, whether it's a career goal, if it's a vision or something, and then find people who are doing that as their baseline. They're already doing that business as usual in their lives. Then you attach yourselves to people like that, not in a clingy, weird way, but not in I'm gonna converse with this person, right? I want to take them out to lunch. I want to identify some of their best practices so I can replicate those myself. And then you get on that level, right? And then you help people up get to that level. Then you identify a new level. And so that is kind of the way I approach that scenario. And look, we're doing business with him now, and super happy to, not only give him a shout out on the podcast, but to also continue to do business with him. When you find good people that you can trust, that you can invest with, you can essentially make your effect larger to a larger audience, and that's what we're about,
And on the flip side of that, I've also experienced where, let's say there is someone you want to connect with, you see what they have, and you think, I want to be like that person. And sometimes I meet them, and I have a conversation, and it's just not happening. You guys aren't vibing, or maybe you find out they aren't someone that you really want to work with. And I think it's so that can happen too, but it's all about learning those relationships and being flexible. And if that person isn't really someone that you guys are, you guys have a vibe, or you guys want to work together and you don't feel that, then that's okay. There is someone out there that you just keep on trying, and you keep on networking, and just be open. Don't quit, and you'll find that person eventually.
Yeah, most definitely. Just like you submit LOIs, right, for properties, eventually one of them is going to hit. The same concept rings true for partnerships as well.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about your W-2 and commingling that with real estate, because a lot of people do that. A lot of people, I've heard of people having, 50 million under assets, and they're a teacher, and then they quit. And and I've been on the flip side where I almost had nothing and I quit my job just to do that. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, man, I love this topic because I get paid to fly airplanes. It's a really cool job, man. My first job was an instructor pilot for T6s, and I taught people how to fly upside down in formation at night in the weather. It was truly rewarding, right? So it was awesome, man. We'll have to absolutely talk about it some more. But number one, you recognize the environment that you're in and you ask yourself, do I like to be here? Do I want to continue to be here? Thankfully for me, the answer to that question is yes, right? There's this old quote that says, pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work. It's a pleasure for me to go fly airplanes, especially for the military and defending the U.S. So that's awesome. I have a cohort of people that I work with who are high caliber people that I would leave my kid with. They have a top secret security clearance, and generally speaking, they're good people, right? That helps. Okay, so how do I balance the W-2 with what I'm doing right now? It's all about partnerships for me. Me and Pat, we have a unique way of working. He's on the East Coast, I'm on the West Coast. So we have a delta of a couple of hours time difference, right? And so he's able to knock a lot of stuff out while I'm still sleeping in the morning. And while he's asleep at night, I'm able to knock a lot of stuff out. It's 2022. We're super active on phones, laptops, different platforms that allow for us to communicate messages, whether it's via text or email or a phone call to our property managers, to our attorneys, whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, and I don't know if I quite grasped the initial question, Caleb, remind me of it. But the W-2 concept for me is one that requires some time management. And if I'm being transparent, eventually there will come a time where I'm going to transition out of the Air Force and into doing this full time. I'm super excited about that. But for those listeners who are in a very similar boat, here's my message: is identify best practices that are working for you right now in your W-2. Apply those same best practices to what you know in the multifamily industry, if that's the industry that you're in, right? And that's what we consider missionizing our approach to investments. We, in the same way that I approach electronic warfare for the Air Force and applying my EC-130 into combat, is the same way I will mission plan for underwriting or the execution of buying an apartment complex. I will study it. I will ask questions to industry experts. I will chair fly it. Chair flying for us as an aviator is to sit down at a chair and, to no kidding, go through the motions. I push the throttles up, speed goes up. I rotate, I pull the stick back. The airplane gets in the sky, right? I rotate. I'm going to bring the gear and the flaps up. At 2 miles past the departure into the runway, I'm going to turn left to this heading. I can visualize what I'm doing with an apartment complex as well. We need to underwrite this. If it underwrites and it does well, we need to advertise this. We need to submit an LOI, whatever it may be, whatever those steps are. So, a long way of answering this question. Super happy with the fact that I'm able to balance a W-2 in this. I have the ability, from a monetary perspective, to not be solely dependent upon the money that I get from the business and make rational, data-driven decisions because I have my pot of money that is a W-2. So there's a lot of key nuggets and there's a lot of benefits. A lot of people will kind of cast shade on the W-2 worker who attempts to balance this as well, because they're like, oh no, you don't have enough time to devote. Okay, you're right. I may not have enough time to devote, but if I have partnerships like I talked about that help time management, if I'm making data-driven decisions by not relying solely on that money, you can make some really solid decisions that will exponentially grow your pot of cash. That is your side hustle, if you will. I say side hustle because it's not. It's a second job, essentially.
Right. And that's such a good point, and I've never heard it said that way before, where if you find what works for you in your day job, then you can replicate that and put that towards your business. And I think everyone listening will just need to, that's a very case-by-case basis, and I think they'll all just need to take that and ponder that a little bit to think, what can I replicate from what works to the successful business side of things.
Yeah, most definitely. What do people approach you for at your day job that you are an expert in? If you're a techie, if you understand software, or if you're an engineer and you understand the inner workings of calculations, perhaps you're a better underwriter, right? If you are a tremendous public speaker and you are always the one who's tapped to go MC a large event, or you're doing something for a large group of people and they want, Captain Torres or Ricardo or whoever it might be to be in front speaking to people, perhaps you should be out there talking to a lot of investors. And the last thing I'll say about this is our W-2 presents us the opportunity to work with other like-minded individuals who are interested in placing their money in an asset class that is different than the traditional 401k or retirement account, right? And so not only am I able to marry together an investor that we work, or excuse me, a fellow employee that we work with to an investment deal, but I'm able to continue to influence a group of folks that aren't necessarily as privy to the multifamily industry. That if you're already a civilian, in my case, right, or not in my case, a civilian, and you're working in that industry, you're working with alongside a lot of other civilians. Whereas with me, we're able to kind of tap into a different network, and that's something that we're really excited about.
Mm-hmm. And before we depart, I want to ask another question. That obviously you're a high achiever, and to get to that level, you need to have some habits in place, right? Some good habits.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what has really helped shaped you, be it a routine, a habit, just some little takeaways?
Yeah, absolutely. So I got this one, man, and I've been doing this for a while now, and I actually have it on my calendar. I use Outlook as a calendar to help organize my days, and it's called Connect 3. And I have it at the top of my calendar every single day, and it lasts for 15 minutes. And what I mean by Connect 3 is this: I will connect with 3 different people every single day in some way, shape, or form. Here's how it helps. Connecting with 3 people, and this is a meaningful connection, right? I'm not just like, hey, Caleb, good morning. I spoke to Caleb last week. He was telling me he was working on this deal. I'm curious about that. How did that deal turn out? Caleb, good morning, brother. Hopefully everything's well. How'd that deal turn out? Excited to hear about your progress. Now, that's one form of communication, right? Is via text message. I could pick up the phone and call a second person and just say, hey, Fal, I got a good friend, Fal. Hey, Fal, how are things going in Florida? I understand you're recently selling your home. Let me know if you have any questions on this deal or whatever it might be. And then that's the second example. A third example would be, hey, no kidding, need some help moving your furniture from your house or whatever. I want to be there and I want to try to help out, because if you're connecting with folks, then you maintain a large group of folks in your network that trust you, that recognize you as somebody who wants to help out. So I do that, Caleb, and it's a very simple Connect 3. I do it every single day. I take the weekends off rather, but I do it Monday through Friday, and it allows for me to stay connected to a large group of folks who recognize that I have a desire to care, and I have a desire to want to help folks out. And that is one nugget that I use. There's all sorts of different approaches that folks can take, but I think at the end of the day, staying organized is key. Time management is tremendous, and you have to put yourself in a little bit of an uncomfortable position sometimes in order to see that growth, right? It's like a lobster. It's going to shed its shell and it's going to grow a new one, but it needs that to happen in order for it to grow. Otherwise, it'll stay small.
Mm-hmm. I've never heard of that Connect 3 before, and that's so cool. And man. And in real estate, we're always working towards the next thing, and the day job, you always have a mission. But what really matters is the connections with the people, right? Because we can't take what we have here whenever we pass on, and what will last are those relationships and the impact that you make here. And I know some people, it is about the money, and that makes them happy, and that's just not me. But what I found the most value is giving and seeing a smile on someone else's face and knowing that they can't repay you back for that. And sounds like, I mean, you're right on the money with there. That's great. That's good. Yeah, man. Yeah, try it. It's a really cool concept, and it doesn't take long to do, and it's a way to stay connected, because I get energy that way too, right? Like I'm an extrovert. I like talking to people. I like staying connected with people, and so it's a way to help myself as well. Mm-hmm. That's great. Well, Ricardo, I really enjoyed this. Let's ask 3 quick questions before we head out of here. The first being, if you can recommend one book to our listeners that really impacted you, what would that be?
So the book I want to recommend today is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Phenomenal book. If you haven't read this, you gotta put it on your Amazon list, put it on as an audiobook. It's a great way to look at the soft skill behind all the other hard skills that are so easy to learn, right? I can get on YouTube right now and learn a hard skill, and somebody teaches me step 1, step 2, step 3. That's the easy button, in my opinion, generally speaking, right? The hard button is the soft skill, and that is dealing with people, that is influencing people, and doing so in a manner that is authentic, that's real, that's communicative, and that's two-way. Because if you can do that, I mean, look, it's lights out. The opportunities are endless. And so for me, a large part of our business is raising capital, is recognizing what the need is for an investor, and then marrying that investor to an investment opportunity that satisfies that. If I go in willy-nilly and I just start, blasting off all 2 or 3, 4 different opportunities for investments that don't necessarily fit the investor, that's a faux pas on my part. And that's me demonstrating that I'm not listening quite well. So how to win friends and influence people gives me a lot of nuggets as to how you approach a conversation like that, and just be a better person in terms of chatting with people. Be a better listener. That's a huge thing. You just close your mouth, open your ears, listen, digest what the person's telling you, and then move on in the conversation from there. And I promise you, it goes a lot better.
Great book. That's spot on.
Yeah.
If people can learn or they want to learn more about you, where is the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, just visit our website, vectoredequity.com. There you can find so many other ways to communicate and to connect with us. And the thing I'll say about that is I promise you, my phone line's open, my email's open. Call us, text us, reach out. We want to connect with you.
That's great. And lastly, if you can share one thing with our listeners that they can just take one thing away from all this, what would that be?
Yeah. It's going to depend on your goals and your vision, but the biggest thing that I can offer you is, it's again going to be that soft skill, because if there's anything you've learned from me in these quick 35, 40 minutes, it's about the philosophy and the psychological approach to things. So I would say, get comfortable being uncomfortable. And what I mean by that is, if you're not uncomfortable, the chances of you growing are not as high. You have to get in an uncomfortable state. You have to begin to do things that your previous version of yourself did not do. You're not gonna have change until you do something different. And so if you're in your real estate career right now, or whatever you envision for your life, and where you envision yourself being, identify what tasks and what actions are going to be required to get there, and start doing those. It may mean that you have to disrupt your Thursday evenings to go to a investor meetup. It may mean that you have to disrupt your Thursday night and go to Phoenix, where you and I met each other a couple of weeks ago. It may mean that you have to get on a call and do some additional studying to better understand something. But that's okay. If you're willing to put the work in, that's where you want to be, and that's where you want to go. You're going to have to get uncomfortable. So the more you begin to do these things, the more comfortable you get with being uncomfortable, and eventually it becomes the norm. And that's when you really start to strive. That's where you really start to see some tremendous progress. I'll end it with an analogy that Arnold Schwarzenegger gave on his movie Pumping Iron. It's an old school movie, but it's an awesome movie. He said, when you're doing bicep reps, for example, and you're doing repetitions, he's like, don't count the rep until it actually starts to hurt. And I think to myself, I go into the gym. Most days that's like 7 or 8 reps in. Right. I'm trying to get that up, but you get to 7 or 8 and it starts to hurt, and now you're back at 0. Follow that philosophy. Start your count then. Mm-hmm. Because when you start to hurt is when that discomfort starts to come in, right? Recognize where the period at which you become uncomfortable, and then break through that, and that is your new 0. That's what I recommend.
That's great. Just take that one more step and just focus on the one. If you focus on the 15 reps, it's not gonna get there, but just one more.
No, because you'll always do the 15 reps, right? You'll always do the norm. But if you start to hurt at 14 now, guess what? Now your new 1 is 15, and so you're able to do so much more.
That's awesome. Ricardo, really appreciate your time, brother. We're looking forward to releasing this. So everyone, hope you enjoyed that, and we'll catch you next time.
It's time to grab your victory. Find us on the web at redseacapitalgroup.com and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Red Sea Capital Group.